I think people's response to advocacy has shifted over the last 2 or 3 centuries. Very high commitment, obviously, in the kind of Wilberforce era, and the whole abolitionist thing was very much at the center of Christian advocacy. I think we lost it significantly between the end of the 19th century into, say, the 1970s. And our distancing from political engagement has meant, with that, there's also been a very strong suspicion of advocacy and anything to do with political engagement at all. So I think we have some grounds to make up. The history of advocacy shows that it actually does make a difference. Right here in the United Kingdom, the Chartist movement was incredibly successful in bringing the concerns of the poor. William Booth, Wilberforce, supremely, have all demonstrated that advocacy really does make a difference. Martin Luther King in the United States, Gandhi in India. So we have a really good track record to say that when what a friend of mine calls ordinary prophets rise up, people really can change things and even change policy. Wilberforce was a very extraordinary guy. He was a parliamentarian. He had around him people who were very well resourced. But frankly, Wilberforce and the abolitionist movement over 30 years could never have succeeded without masses and masses of people coming behind this campaign. And when Wilberforce laid out his petition to Parliament, it was the largest and most significant petition Parliament had ever seen. So a motley crew of very ordinary prophets were really the people who gave substance to what Wilberforce and his friends did. I think historically we have broken ground through advocacy. Wilberforce is the celebrated example. I think if you look at the work of the Chartist movement here, which preceded the trade union movement right here in the UK, there is ample evidence that advocacy makes a difference. And by the way, many Christians were involved in the Chartist movement. If one looks at the civil rights movement and the work of Martin Luther King or Gandhi in India, advocacy has demonstrated its power to change people's minds and ultimately to change policies. Yeah, there's still quite a bit of suspicion around the whole idea of advocacy. I suspect it's probably 3 primary reasons. There's a theological reason. Didn't Jesus say that the poor you will always have with you? So let's lay back and just get on with social action. And that's, of course, a terrible misrepresentation of what Jesus actually meant. And I think, secondly, there is a political reason. People are still very concerned of anything to do with political engagement and becoming party political animals and actually politicizing Christian faith. But that kind of disengagement, I think every time Joseph, Prime Minister of Egypt, or Daniel, Prime Minister of Babylon, or the 3 Hebrew boys, hears that kind of argument, they must actually lean over the banisters of heaven and say, what? Because actually political engagement is an integral part of our advocacy role. And thirdly, there's a lot of concerns about the economics of advocacy. Why should we be giving our aid money to corrupt governments? And once again, that's just such a misrepresentation of the facts. So we are all really concerned about the domestic priorities of our lives. Politics is driven by domestic concerns. My children, their education, my job, my welfare, my pension scheme. And so it becomes very hard to pull away from the gravitational pull of domestic priorities to really translate the story of the Good Samaritan in the 21st century. Who is my neighbor? Yes, my neighbor is the 1.4 billion people around the world who live on less than $1.25 per day, and that their well-being or their disenfranchisement in some way actually affects me sitting in the privacy of my living room. And somehow I have to get hold of the fact that I am bound up together with those who are poor and that they are a part of me, and in this global economy I am absolutely a part of them. Relief and development and advocacy is a part of the same continuum. A very important journey has happened in the Christian church over the last 30 or 40 years. We have been very comfortable with ideas of praying for those who are poor. The holiness tradition has been very committed to that. And we've moved beyond that to become very involved in social action. We do that very well. The bit we haven't quite cracked is advocacy. And in biblical terms, it's how you take Moses from the burning bush of holiness and private devotion to standing in Pharaoh's house to say, let the people go. This is advocacy. And we can't be a part of Moses' life in the privacy of the burning bush, or even in the networking of the elders, and then forsake him when he turns up in Pharaoh's house to say, let the people go. It's a part of the same theological and political continuum. Well, Micah Challenge is seeking to mobilize millions of Christians around the world to do two things. One is to deepen our own commitment to responding to extreme poverty through action. But secondly, and very importantly, it is to rise up as an advocacy movement, reminding our governments that promises were made which ought to be kept. So it's biblical advocacy on behalf of extreme poor. The thought of advocacy can be daunting when you first sit, with a hot towel around your head. But actually what we found in our global campaign last year, as 400 people approached their politicians around the world, was that most of them were excited. They felt a sense of rejuvenation and a sense of real involvement to be able to stand before your MP and say, remember the poor in the name of God, was something people really enjoyed, and we were very excited about it. If advocacy means anything, if Wilberforce tells us anything about advocacy, it's not just about the petition you put to Parliament, it is about how you give your entire self to the project. So it's about where you shop, it is about how you use your finance, it's about how you do your own domestic arrangements, it's about your environmentalism. So it's a whole lifestyle change which then makes the advocacy an authentic event. If advocacy doesn't embrace pain and pleasure, perhaps it's not advocacy. There's a fantastic scripture, Isaiah 58, which talks about pouring out your soul to the hungry. That will mean very different things for different people. But equally, that same passage goes on to talk about your light shining like the noonday. And because God respects and honors sacrifice, it means that our sacrifices have their own reward, not just in heaven, but right here on the planet.